It was 3 years ago. I remember the air being cool. The forest on both sides of the asphalt road was swallowed by darkness. I rubbed my eyes behind the wheel. I had been driving for almost 5 hours and my exhaustion had become unbearable. A few miles ahead, I saw a small sign on the left side, its lights flickering. I think it said Pinewood Motel, though I might be mistaken. I didn't have many options. I turned the steering wheel and drove onto the dirt road leading to the motel. It was an old place, not a multi-story concrete building, but a row of single-story rooms lying along the roadside. The reception area was a wooden cabin dimly illuminated by a faint yellow light. I pushed the door open and stepped inside. An old man sat behind the counter. His eyes were sunken, his face etched with the fatigue of years. He lifted his head and looked at me. "Single room?" he asked, his voice deep and raspy. I nodded. The man slowly pulled the register book in front of him and slid it toward me. "Write your name. Your room is number 7. We don't serve breakfast. There's hot water, but the pressure drops sometimes. The TV works, but don't expect many channels." I took the key and walked to my room. It was simple, worn wooden furniture, a small table, a single chair, and a bed. I glanced at the mirror behind the door, then dropped my bag on the floor and sat on the bed. As midnight approached, sleep began to overtake me. I lay down and closed my eyes. My tired body quickly relaxed, and I drifted into a deep sleep. Then I woke up to the sound of footsteps on the wooden floor. I lifted my head and looked toward the door. A shadow was visible under the gap beneath it. It was completely silent, no footsteps now. First, I thought someone might be searching for something in their pockets. I figured they'd leave in a few seconds, but they didn't. Minutes passed and the uneasy feeling in my chest refused to fade. I turned back to look. The shadow was still there. "Who's there?" I called out, my voice firm. No response. The shadow lingered a little longer, then finally moved. I got up, walked to the door, and opened it cautiously. Nothing. The outside was empty except for the flickering neon sign in the distance. A strange unease settled over me, but I was too tired to think much of it. Maybe someone had arrived late and mistaken my room for theirs. Just as I was about to get back into bed, I heard a door creak open the room next to mine. That made sense. Maybe they had the wrong room and just now realized it. The old wooden hinges groaned softly. Perhaps they were drunk or had also been on a long drive like me. I rested my head back on the pillow and closed my eyes. No more than 30 minutes passed before the phone's shrill ring jolted me awake. I opened my eyes. The room was pitch black. The phone sat on the small knit stand beside me. For a few seconds, I struggled to grasp what was happening. Then I reached for the receiver. "Hello," it was the receptionist. "Mr. Stevens, sorry to disturb you, but we received a noise complaint from your room." I frowned. "What? I've been asleep all night. I didn't make any noise." The old man's voice carried a nervous undertone. "Really, the guest in the room next to yours reported hearing loud thuds and someone shouting from your room, even scratching at his door. Are you alone?" A chill ran down my spine. "Yes, I'm alone. I swear I didn't do any of that." The receptionist hesitated. "The guest next to you checked in a few hours ago. We gave him a room, but he seemed a little off. Maybe it's just a misunderstanding. I can come over and check if you'd like." The discomfort inside me grew, but I composed myself. "No, that's okay. Maybe he's just a sleepwalker or drunk." The old man's voice remained cautious. "If anything happens, please call me." After that, I barely slept. In the morning, I went straight to the reception desk. The old man was there, watching me carefully. "How was your night?" he asked. I squinted at him. "Honestly, some weird things happened last night. Someone stood outside my door for minutes. When I called out, they left. Do you know anything about the guy in the next room?" The old man furrowed his brows. "Not much, actually. He arrived late at night, kept to himself, but seemed uneasy. He checked out early this morning. Didn't say a word. I had always thought things like this only happened in movies." "You don't know him at all?" I asked. The man shook his head. "No, just another customer. But he was really disturbed by the noises he heard last night. He even asked to change rooms but decided to leave before dawn." I stood there for a moment, processing it all. The guy in the next room claimed he had heard noises from my room, but I had been alone all night. I took a deep breath and left the motel. As I drove away, a strange feeling gnawed at me. I had assumed the guy next door was the one who had been lurking outside my room. But what if something had been lurking outside both of our doors? Or maybe it was just a drunk's late-night paranoia. I still wonder about it. About 22 years ago, I went on a road trip with my ex-girlfriend. Destination was essentially nowhere. We had no plans when we set out. We just wanted to explore the journey itself. It was such a spontaneous trip that we didn't even really know where we were on the map. On the early morning of one of the days, we stopped at a gas station, and that's when I realized we were in Nebraska. There were so many cornfields around that it felt like the entire world consisted of these golden crops. Just an empty stretch of land with endless cornfields stretching to the horizon. It was one of those ordinary places we simply passed through without thinking twice. By the end of the second day on the road, both of us were exhausted. After hours of driving, we decided to take a break. Slowly, we pulled into an old motel by the roadside. It felt like a small, rundown motel in a town that time had forgotten. The place looked like it had been abandoned in some way. There were only a few rooms, maybe 5 or 6 at most. But we were so tired we didn't have the energy to look for another place. We figured we could just spend the night here at worst. It was almost midnight by the time we got out of the car and walked into the motel's lobby. As soon as we entered, I noticed a massive man standing behind the reception desk. There was nobody else around. He was all alone, standing behind the counter. This guy was enormous, almost indescribably big. I'm a pretty large guy myself, but this man had to be around 7 feet tall, and his body was even broader and more muscular. He almost looked like he could crush me with one hand. His build was solid, like something carved from a tree trunk. Even his eyes were strange, like he was disconnected from the world. He didn't look like any person I'd ever seen. His face had a weird, blank expression, a sort of mystical look, but at the same time an unsettling calmness. My girlfriend wasn't as nervous as I was. She was just there to grab the key to our room, so she didn't really pay much attention, but I could feel a sense of dread filling me up. Before saying anything, the man just smiled. He didn't say a word, just nodded, wrote something down, took the payment, and handed us our key. It was an odd situation because in places like this, people usually talk more, try to be friendly. But this guy, he didn't say anything, just smiled, and the transaction was done. While all of this was happening, noticed something strange on the counter old television screens. There were a few monitors, and one of them immediately caught my eye. On one screen, there was a bizarre video. It was a pornographic video, but a very strange one. It showed young women, very young, riding stationary bikes and lifting weights in a gym, but they looked mechanical. Their bodies seemed artificial, their movements robotic and oddly imitative. I only managed to glance at it for a few seconds, but that image has stayed in my mind ever since. My girlfriend didn't see what was on the screen because she could only lean over the counter, but I had seen it, and it disturbed me. There was something off about what I saw. I felt uneasy and debated telling her, but I decided not to, probably because we were both so sleep deprived. We went up to our room, and despite how creepy and strange everything felt, we decided to rest and sleep for a few hours. In the room, there was a strange vibe. Something felt wrong, but I couldn't pinpoint what. I placed our 2 large suitcases in front of the door and put a vase on top of them, in case someone tried to open the door. I also set up plastic cups in front of the window, so if they opened it, the cups would fall and make a noise. That way, if something happened, we'd be able to react. Slowly, we took a shower, changed, and climbed into bed. It was around 11:45 p.m. We were so exhausted that I fell asleep instantly. But at about 3:30 a.m., I woke up. I slowly became aware of my surroundings, feeling a slight dizziness. I sensed something was off, but I couldn't figure out what. At that moment, I didn't notice anything in the bed, but I had a strange feeling of restlessness. After tossing and turning for a while, I decided to get up and get some water. I went downstairs to grab some ice from the lobby. It was quiet, only the occasional echoing sounds. But when I got to the lobby, the giant man was gone. I thought, where did he go? And then, for some strange reason, I decided to take another look at the old TV screens. All the old CCTV monitors were still on. One screen was showing the same strange video from earlier. Another showed the parking lot. But one screen completely shocked me. It was showing the inside of our room. My girlfriend was sleeping soundly in the bed. Everything seemed normal. But someone was watching us. In that moment, fear spread through my entire body. My heart began to race. I quickly rushed back to the room, woke my girlfriend up, and told her we needed to leave. Repacking our things, we rushed to the car and drove away as fast as we could. I never wanted to remember that night again, but there are some things that stayed with me. That man, that giant man, why was he there? Why did he smile without saying a word? And that weird pornographic video, who made it? Why was it so strange? I still don't have answers to those questions. My girlfriend was so tired she didn't notice anything, but we both felt it. Something was very wrong. Every time I think back to that night, I still feel those emotions all over again.
A few years ago, I was on my way to Chicago for a business trip. These kinds of trips used to be routine for me, but this time it was different. I was leaving my 4-year-old daughter, Annie, for the first time since she was born. Holding my coffee, I tucked my bag under my seat and settled into my window seat. As the plane filled up, I wondered who would sit next to me. A moment later, I was met with a familiar face. It was Mark, a former colleague. He smiled as he took the seat beside me. "Lisa, what a small world, huh?" he said cheerfully. I was surprised. We had never been close. In fact, we had barely exchanged a word at work. "Mark, yeah, it really is," I replied with a forced smile. He talked throughout the entire flight, almost non-stop. He told me about his job, his recent move, and new projects he was working on. He even went on about the new furniture in his bedroom. Out of politeness, I mentioned my daughter and how her curiosity was growing with age. Mark seemed overly interested. "Wow, it's great to see you as a mum. I'm sure you're doing an amazing job. Maybe I'll meet her someday," he said. His words caught me off guard. Meet her someday? What does that even mean? I forced another smile and replied, "Maybe." When the plane landed, we said our goodbyes as I grabbed my bag and hurried toward the exit. Relieved to be rid of him, I suddenly felt a tap on my shoulder. You guessed it, it was Mark. "Are you heading to downtown? Want to share a cab?" he asked. I felt uneasy. I've always been bad at saying no, so I just nodded without thinking. Luckily, when we got to the cab, the driver intervened. "Sorry, sir, this is a single-person reservation," he said. Mark looked a bit annoyed but forced a smile and waved. "See you around, Lisa." Once I arrived downtown, I decided to explore a bit before checking into my hotel. I wandered into a shopping mall, picked up some clothes and snacks, then stepped back outside. That's when I saw him, Mark, on the opposite sidewalk. When he noticed me noticing him, he froze for a moment, then turned and walked away. My eyes widened. Was this a coincidence? On the plane, he had told me he was staying at a hotel far from downtown for a meeting. I hurried away and went straight to my hotel. After a hot shower, I FaceTimed my husband and daughter. The warmth of my family washed away my lingering unease. About an hour later, as I was watching TV, my phone rang. "This is the front desk. Miss Carter, your husband is here in the lobby and has requested a key to your room. May we grant him access?" I'm sure you can imagine what I felt at that moment. My blood ran cold. "What? I just talked to my husband an hour ago. He's 5 hours away from here." "That's impossible. Call the police right now," I said, my voice shaking. After a brief pause, the receptionist responded, "I'm sorry, Mum. We'll notify security immediately," and hung up. My heart was pounding. I locked the door, trying to steady my breathing as I listened for any sound outside. Moments later, I heard voices in the hallway, security guards. "Sir, please come with us." Peeking through the peephole, I couldn't believe my eyes. It was Mark. He was grinning, looking straight at my door. Then he turned to the guards and said, "It's fine, I'm her husband." Security quickly removed him from receptionist came to my door. "Miss Carter, we sincerely apologise for this situation. He told us he was your husband and wanted to surprise you. He even showed us an ID." My voice trembled. "That man is a former co-worker. We just happened to be on the same flight. Call the police now." She assured me they were already on their way. We headed down to the lobby together, and there he was, Mark. His eyes held a twisted, unsettling look. My stomach turned. "Say hi to Annie for me," he called out. My heart stopped. How did he know my daughter's name? I had never told him. Minutes later, the police arrived and took him into custody. After reviewing the security footage, the police confirmed that Mark had been lurking in the lobby, watching for the right moment to approach the front desk. The ID he had shown was fake, a forgery using real stolen information. He had no meetings, no job, nothing. I still don't know how long he had been watching me or what his actual plan was. My life changed after that night. I can't sleep in a hotel room without double locking the door. I measure every word before mentioning my children to strangers. If the front desk receptionist hadn't been cautious enough to call me first, things could have ended very differently.